Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're doing a deep dive into something pretty intense, a real-world case study of severe online harassment. By systematically breaking down a documented text exchange, we're going to map out the exact anatomy of a cyberbullying attack. We'll look at how digital hostility originates, how terrifyingly fast it can escalate, and the specific psychological tactics an abuser uses. Our goal here is to empower you with a real understanding of these mechanisms so we can all better identify and comprehend the architecture of digital abuse. Okay, let's dive right into this. Now, before we really get into it, I need to give you a serious heads up. The direct source material we are analyzing today contains highly explicit language, intense transphobia, and extremely graphic threats of physical and sexual violence. Because we're doing a clinical analysis of a real attack, we are presenting the unvarnished text to accurately understand the severity of the escalation. Viewer discretion is strongly advised here. So here's how we're going to break this down today. First, the initial interrogation. Second, the sudden escalation to violent threats. Third, how the abuser weaponizes society and the law. And finally, the victim's resistance and their SOS. Let's get started. All right, part one, the initial interrogation. Take a look at how this opens. It's incredibly abrupt. The abuser slides in with a simple hello, but boom, immediately follows it up with a highly aggressive, derogatory question about the recipient's gender. It's a total boundary violation right out of the gate. The victim, who's maybe just trying to de-escalate or, just answer honestly, simply replies, "Sorry, I am a trans girl." What's absolutely wild here from a behavioral standpoint is that the abuser isn't actually asking a question to get an answer. They're setting a trap. They're instantly establishing this super hostile dynamic. And here is the immediate consequence of that trap. The abuser drops this absolutely chilling declaration. You shouldn't exist. I mean, wow. That single line is a massive escalation all on its own. We've instantly gone from an invasive, rude question to a fundamental, absolute denial of the victim's right to literally just exist in the world. It completely sets the stage for the intense dehumanization that's about to follow. So let's break down the actual tactics being used in just these first few messages. First off, you've got this invasive questioning about gender, which is clearly designed to make the victim feel totally exposed and defensive. Second, there's that absolute invalidation of their existence that we just talked about. But third, and this is a really notable detail in the source text, the abuser starts throwing around classist insults. They specifically refer to people like the victim as a beggar in street in India. So what's happening here? The abuser is strategically layering their attacks. They're mixing transphobic hate with intense societal and classist slurs to just entirely strip away the victim's perceived humanity and social standing. Moving on to part two, escalation to violent threats. This is where things take a truly dark turn. In these consecutive messages, the abuser fully exploits the perceived anonymity of the internet to hurl incredibly graphic threats of rape and murder. And they don't stop there. They try to inject pure terror by claiming things like, "I know your family and I know your address." This right here, this perfectly illustrates the core mechanic of digital terrorism. The abuser is desperately trying to collapse that digital distance. They want the victim to feel like this online threat is an immediate, inescapable, real-world physical danger. The language just becomes entirely unfiltered and horrifically violent. Now, I really want you to look at the timeline here. The timestamps we pulled from the source reveal a momentum that is just relentless. Okay, 1747 is the initial contact. By 1748, literally 1 minute later, the chat escalates to graphic threats of sexual violence. By 1749, the abuser is throwing out doxing threats. Think about that. The entire core of this traumatic assault happens in a window of basically 2 to 3 minutes. It is a rapid-fire barrage, a total blitz, designed to completely overwhelm the victim's psychological defenses before they can even process what on earth is happening. Which brings us to part three, weaponizing society and law. Here, we're seeing a really fascinating, albeit deeply disturbing psychological tactic. The abuser explicitly states the authorities did right things to you and brands the victim a big problem to society. What they're doing is trying to frame their own unhinged abusive behavior as somehow being socially sanctioned. It's wild. They're actively trying to convince the victim that the entire world, including law enforcement, agrees with this abuse.
It's a calculated isolation tactic meant to make the victim feel entirely alone, completely cut off, and unsupported by civilization itself.
Laws should fuck you through in dustbin. I mean, this is a chilling attempt to weaponize the very concept of the legal system. Normally, the law is supposed to be a source of protection, right? But here, the abuser twists it into an imaginary weapon to beat down a marginalized individual. The entire goal is to further terrorize them by planting this idea that even the fundamental legal framework of their own country exists for no other reason than to just throw them away.
All right, our final section, Part 4, Resistance and the SOS.
This juxtaposition right here really hits the nail on the head regarding the core dynamic of this entire case. On one side, you have the abuser spewing this violent, completely irrational hatred. You shouldn't exist. But then, juxtaposed right against that, you have the victim's incredibly grounded, composed pushback. I have the right to exist as a citizen. Even in the face of this intense, rapid-fire trauma, the victim is grounding themselves in their fundamental, legal reality. It is such a powerful moment of resistance. You literally have pure digital hostility going head-to-head with calm, civic logic. But as much as we'd like it to, logic rarely stops a determined predator. Ultimately, despite that incredibly composed pushback, the escalation reaches a tipping point of immediate danger. The victim is forced to issue a public SOS. They post to their network, stating they have lost their trust, and they are practically begging their community, their besties, their pride, to step in and protect them from this person. They realize that individual logic has hit a wall, and they absolutely have to activate a collective defense. It's their digital community acting as a literal shield. So let's quickly recap the victim's defense mechanisms here because they were far from passive. Throughout this explainer, we've seen them systematically trying to defend themselves. They firmly asserted their legal citizenship rights. They didn't back down. They directly identified and called out the abuser's transphobia. Actually, they even managed to flip the script at one point, condemning the abuser as illiterate pollution to society. And finally, when the boundaries of that one-on-one private chat completely collapsed into an unsafe zone, they successfully leveraged their digital network by broadcasting that public SOS.
As we wrap up this anatomical analysis, I really want to leave you chewing on this question. What are the real-world consequences when digital platforms fail to intercept this level of targeted, systemic dehumanization and violent threat? We just watched an attack escalate from a single hello to graphic death threats in literally under 2 minutes. When our online ecosystems allow this kind of extreme hate to just flow entirely unchecked toward our most vulnerable citizens, the cost isn't just digital. It's deeply psychological, it's physical, and it absolutely tears at the fabric of our society. Thank you so much for joining me for this difficult but absolutely crucial explainer. Keep analyzing, keep questioning, and I'll catch you next time.